of y'all have never turned a box before? Okay. How many of y'all have never turned a bowl before? Okay. Well, I'll be looking for y'all then. Make sure make sure I'm getting some understanding, since y'all probably have the most questions. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I can tell from a lot of boxes up here, they're segmented boxes where you use dry wood. The approach I'm going to use is I'm going to turn a box, unlike the boxes I did last May. This is going to be a side grain box that's really more like a bowl with a lid on it. You know, maybe calling it a box is not exactly right. It's more of a lidded vessel. The only issue with the approach that I use, like a bowl, unlike a bowl where you can turn it green and let it warp and go organic, be finished with it, people say, well, how'd you turn it that way? You know, they like the shape, but with a box, you want the lid to fit. The lid to fit means you got to turn it twice. You got to turn it once. You're going to turn it to about 10% diameter, uniform thickness. Then you're going to put some anchor seal on it, or in my case, wrap some this stretch tape on it. Put it back in a bag and let it dry for a few months, and maybe take it out and look at it, swap bags after the first few days, a couple times, so you don't get too much mold on it. And I've had my best luck. I've had real good luck with it. Had very few failures. I do better by storing it in my garage that's unair conditioned rather than leaving it in my air conditioned basement shop, because you're going to have low humidity and it's going to dry a little too fast. But having it in a bag tends to slow that down a little bit, or you can put it in a corrugated box. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to use a bowl blank. Now, for those of y'all not familiar, you think of a tree shaped kind of like this. Well, that's not how we're going to make it. This is really the orientation of the tree where it's cut down the middle. Now, the approach that I use, and you don't have to use this approach, there's several ways you can chuck it up initially. You can either use a spur center, you can use a face plate. That's a nice secure method, but I like to use a woodworm screw because it's fast, it's convenient, and almost every screw chuck comes with one, and it's got some flats on it that'll hold it. So when you put it in there, you want to make sure those flats match up against the glides, or the guides that hold the chuck jaws, and pull it forward. First time I used this, I didn't know any better, and I didn't, like a lot of men, I didn't read the instructions. After I chucked a couple of bowls, I found out that I was pushing it all the way back. But you got to pull it forward, because that's, you think about it, you screw it, you're pulling it forward as you tighten it up. So you go ahead and get it tight to begin with. Another little trick that works for me, I always carry a little piece of wax and keep it on my shop handy. Put a little wax on it. It makes it thread on a little bit easier and thread off a little bit easier. When you're turning wood with a woodworm screw, don't leave it overnight. If it starts rusting, it's going to oxidize and get on there. You're going to have a really very difficult time getting it off. Now you screw the hole in it appropriate to your particular woodworm screw. I'm using a Nova, so that's 5/16 of an inch. Well, one other little trick I want to show you. The strength comes not so much from the screw, although they do have deep, sharp grooves on it, so I mean that is what pulls it in, but it's that surface tension or friction of the wood against the jaws. And one way you can make that even stronger is you make you a hardwood disc that fits over the jaws, even with the jaws, so you have an even bigger surface for your blank to fit on. If you don't want to have a screw this large, you normally would for a bowl, but if you're doing a platter, you can always just make you some extra spacers and put a spacer on there, because it doesn't have to be 3/4 of an inch for some things. Now, the one downside of the woodworm screw is that you can't do the kind of stuff that Neil does with it, really big stuff. The limitation is somewhere around 10 inches. More importantly, not more than about 4 inches long for big items. Because the further out it sticks, is the more leverage you're putting on it, and pretty soon you're going to have more leverage on it than it's able to handle. Now, as you turn this thing, because it's going this way, and the screw, to tighten it goes this way, generally it'll get tighter on you. But you do want to make sure, put the spindle lock on it, make sure it's pretty tight, give it a little twist, and it'll hold green wood just fine. it won't hold punky wood. Don't turn punky wood with woodworm screw. Little CA glue can help on some wood to strengthen it a little bit, but it's not going to solve any problems if you have bad wood to start with. So this is going to be the top of the box, this is going to be the bottom of the box. So just like turning a bowl, normally you're going to do it pretty much the same orientation. Bring up your tailstock for support. You don't have to cut this on a bandsaw, cut it around. I find it a lot easier. Some people that are skillful with a chainsaw can cut a hexagon or an octagon out of it. If you lock the edges off, it makes it easier. The trick is figuring out how to turn this thing so it doesn't beat you up too badly. Now, I've seen some people, you think it's logical to try to true up the side, but you're cutting a lot of end grain and it just beats you up. So what you're really trying to do is take the corners off, so you're getting rid of some of this side grain, and it just cuts a little easier. So we're going to crank this thing up. Face shield on. The other thing to remember, stand aside of the lathe when you turn it on, because a lot of times it's not going to run perfectly through. And we're going to try to clean that up as quickly as possible, get it in balance. And just that little bit probably helped it. But go ahead and adjust the tool rest as soon as you can. Get a little closer, get support. I'm not a left-handed turner, but if you learn to do it this way on roughing out, you're not in line of fire for the bowl in case something bad goes wrong. The way that's more comfortable for me is to stand and do it like this, right in the middle, right in line of fire. That doesn't work too well when you're roughing out. This is just a safer approach. It just takes a little practice to learn how to do it. Now your typical stance when you start turning the bowl, general rule of thumb is 45, 45, 45. The angle of the whole tool is about 45 degrees. You're opening it up at about 45 degrees. And you're cutting at the wood at about 45 degrees. And then you just kind of play with the flute a little bit until you feel like you're getting what you want out of it. Now, one of the things, when you get near the edge here, this is where it tends to be irregular and it really tends to beat you up. I mean, it'll hammer on you. When you get near the edge, sweep out to the side, come in a little bit further, sweep out to the side. And if you just keep going into that end right there where it's rough, you're just going to keep letting it beat on you. So just give it a little more shape. Now before I take the final outside shape, I want to determine what size tenon I want to have. Generally speaking, I can use this and it'll size it pretty closely. But I think I might have showed you these before. Go no-go gauges tend to work well as well. If you got several different chucks, you can just kind of eyeball it. When you're turning green wood, you do want to make your tenon a little bit larger, just because it's not as strong, but also because you're going to return it, it's going to move on you. So you want to leave a little room for that. If you make a perfect size tenon, when it's green, you get ready to return it a few months later, and you're going to have a tenon too small for your chuck. So we're going to come straight in, just come on back. The tenon does not have to be that long. The key is having a nice clean shoulder here and having the shape of the tendon appropriate for your jaws. Because I'm using a Novichok, it says, the manufacturer says make them parallel, and then it's got a little bit of what another manufacturer calls a hawk tooth, or a hawk tooth. It kind of bites into it. I have a hard time getting this perfectly square in there with a bowl gouge, so I tend to use a detail gouge to come in there and, you know, make it perfectly parallel with a bedway. The other thing is make sure you got a nice clean shoulder. There's no hint of any rounding or any trash in there, so you want to look at it real close and make sure it's nice and clean in there. Now we're ready to take a final pass. This time I go a little bit slower. Ride the bevel. Try to keep it one continuous pass. Minimize the ripples. I see I got a little bit of a bump here I need to deal with. I'll come back and kind of fix up those ridges with shear scrape. And that's all I'm going to do with this one. Now we're going to turn it around, do the inside. Using dry wood probably. There's a couple of things. Either it's not sharp, or you're pushing on it too hard. Maybe you're riding the bevel too hard. I tend to have that problem sometimes with a skew, where I'm really working hard to ride the bevel. But normally you're going to get some friction. It's going to warm up on a lot of these tools. If you've got it applied to the wood for very long, some of them will warm up. But I've never had them get. This is barely warm. It's green wood. Sharp tools. Parting tools, I have a tendency with parting tools to heat up on you. That's mostly not leaving enough of a gap, coming back and taking a little bit more off of it and taking another pass so you got some room to reduce the friction. The other thing, don't make your tendon too long. The bottom of your tendon should not touch the bottom of your chuck. If it does, it's going to leverage it and have a tendency to cause it to come loose. I like to tighten it at least twice. I don't like to give it everything I got. I try not to use more than one hand to turn it, because you can shear this on some of these wood. If somebody's real strong, you get in there and give it everything you got, you can shear it off, and you don't have to make it that tight. It's just got to be nice and snug. I'm going to start off with some tailstock support to begin with, just a moment. The other thing you got to do when you turn this green wood, here's the pith of the tree. This bowl blank wouldn't have lasted too long because I cut right through the center of the pith, and we really need to come off of that pith a little ways. If we don't, it's inevitable. It's going to self-destruct when it's drying. just wasting wood right now. Now, this sharp corner here, my wrist was getting dangerously close. Always take that sharp edge off. Any wood turning project, deal with that sharp edge, because sooner or later it's going to bite you. Everybody doesn't like to do it. You know, it's the normal disclaimer. This is the way I do it. It's not necessarily the right way. It's not the only way. It may not even be the best way, but it's a way that I've worked out that tends to work for me. I normally drill a depth hole when I'm doing bowls or boxes. This is the fastest and easiest way. Put one in an extra drill bit in a handle. This one is not marked. I've got a 1/4 inch that I've got a little Dremel or a file and marks the little notches in it at about 1 inch intervals, but I can kind of see where this one is. I do have a little notch right there. Keep clearing it, or it'll grab it and jerk it out of your hand. Like that. The 1/4 inch is a little less aggressive. I like a little larger hole with the 5/16, but it does have has a tendency more to grab. When you're turning a deep bowl, I don't like to go and try to hollow it all out at one time. I tend to do it in stages, maybe 1 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then work it down. And that's what I'm going to do, starting with the middle. You want to put your tool rest where the cutting edge is cutting right on center. This is the front of green wood. I remember when I first started turning, I was using scraps of 2x4 and practicing on the skew, and I'd watch Alan Lace's videos, and I'd taken that 2x4 and ripped it into these 1.5 inch pieces of stock, 12 inches long, and just working. And it was kind of fun. And then I remember getting my first piece of real green wood, and it's like, whoa, if I thought turning 2x4s was fun, this is really fun. You don't get these kind of shavings on dry wood. But I said you want to keep this at about 10% thickness. It's 10% of the diameter. So we're going to measure this. And this is about 7.5 inches. So we're looking at having a wall thickness somewhere around 3/4 of an inch. Let's talk about size of the bowl. You can see the examples. These are all good examples of sizes, but let me just tell you what it says on the Beads of Courage site. It says, in order to hold the beads, turned boxes for Beads of Courage need to be about 6 inches in diameter, 5 inches minimum. Rectangular lidded boxes about 4 by 6 by 4 inches, or round lids. Now, why do they need to be that big? These kids, these are some Mardi Gras beads I just used as an example. These kids go through an awful lot of procedures. They wind up with lots and lots of beads. So think about, you know, the beads don't have to be this size, but think about something like this. Because that's what some of these kids are going to wind up with. So you need a pretty good sized box for this stuff to put in. So, you know, a little box is just not going to get it. Pull out my handy ruler here. So that's about where 3/4 of an inch is.